The Sea of Galilee had a strange silence that evening, to calm, to still, almost like the world was holding its breath. The disciples didn't think much about it at first. They were fishermen, men of the water, men who had lived their entire lives reading the moods of the sea. But tonight, even they couldn't read it. Something felt different. Something felt heavy. Jesus stepped into the boat with a quiet grace, the kind that made the roughest waves inside the human heart settle. "Let us go to the other side," he said, his voice steady, gentle, and full of purpose. The disciples nodded and pushed off the shore, the wooden boat creaking as it left the safety of land behind. For a few moments, everything was peaceful. The breeze was soft, the water clear, and the sky wore the fading colors of evening. But then the calm cracked. A strange wind rose from nowhere. It rushed across the water like an unseen force had ripped open the sky. The disciples looked up, startled. The sea that had been glass a moment ago began to shift, then churn, then roar. Within minutes, darkness swallowed the sky. Waves climbed like giants, and the wind howled with the voice of chaos itself. The disciples fought to keep the boat steady, their hands trembling as cold water splashed over them. Even the strongest among them felt fear coil around their hearts. This storm wasn't normal. It wasn't natural. It was violent, sudden, overwhelming, like the sea had turned against them. Peter shouted, "Row! Don't let the boat turn." John yelled back, "The waves are too strong." Andrew clung to the side, his voice breaking, "We're going to sink." And through all this chaos, Jesus slept. There he lay at the stern, his head resting on a cushion, completely untouched by the terror around him. The disciples could barely believe it. How could anyone sleep through a storm that felt like it wanted to tear the world apart? Another massive wave crashed against the boat, and panic finally exploded inside them. "Wake him!" Peter shouted. "Master, wake him!" They rushed to Jesus, shaking him, fear choking their voices. "Lord, don't you care? We are perishing." The sea raged, the wind screamed, the darkness tightened, and then Jesus opened his eyes. The moment had come. When fear spoke louder than faith, Jesus opened his eyes slowly, not with panic, not with confusion, but with the calmness of someone who already knew the end of the story. His gaze moved across the terrified faces of his disciples, men drenched in seawater, shaking from fear, gripping the sides of the boat as if their lives depended on it. In their eyes, he saw a storm far greater than the one outside. Fear, the kind that drowns faith, the kind that blinds the heart, the kind that makes even seasoned fishermen forget who is in the boat with them. The wind screamed again, pushing the boat like a fragile leaf in a violent river. Waves rose like mountains, crashing against the wood, spilling icy water over their feet. The disciples staggered, bracing themselves as another blow hit. "Lord, we are perishing," they cried. Jesus stood up slowly. Even the movement felt powerful, steady, controlled. Water dripped from his clothes, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the authority in his presence, a quiet authority that even creation recognized. Before addressing the storm, Jesus looked at his disciples. His voice was gentle, but carried weight. "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The words struck harder than the waves. They weren't a rebuke. They were a reminder of every miracle they had seen, a reminder of every word he had spoken, a reminder of who he was. But fear had spoken louder than faith in that moment. Jesus then turned, his eyes toward the roaring sea that behaved like a wild beast, threatening to swallow them whole. The disciples held their breath. The storm showed no mercy. Then Jesus raised his hand. The wind roared, but he spoke over it. "Peace, be still." Instantly, not gradually, not slowly, not over time. Instantly, the sea fell silent. The waves dropped. The wind died. The darkness softened. The boat steadied. The Sea of Galilee, moments ago a monster, now lay calm like a child asleep. The disciples stared in absolute shock. Their hearts pounded, not from fear of drowning anymore, but from the overwhelming realization of what had just happened. Nature itself obeyed his voice. They looked at one another, their whispers trembling. Who is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? They had seen miracles before, but this was power on a different level. A silence that spoke louder than thunder. For a long moment, the disciples didn't move. They simply stood frozen in the quiet that now wrapped around them, a quiet so sudden, so absolute, it felt unreal. Just seconds ago, the sea had been a battlefield. Now, the water mirrored the sky with perfect stillness, as if nothing had ever happened. But something had happened, something unforgettable. Something that shattered everything they thought they knew about fear and about Jesus. Peter slowly stepped forward, staring at the calm water. His breath shook. It stopped, just like that. John, still gripping the side of the boat, whispered, not because the storm ended, but because he told it to. The weight of that truth settled on them like a heavy cloak. None of them had ever witnessed authority like this. They had seen Jesus heal diseases, cast out demons, restore the broken. But commanding the sea, overruling the wind, that was the kind of power they believed only God himself possessed. And yet, they had just seen it. Jesus sat back down at the stern, his expression serene, as if he had simply silenced a child throwing a tantrum. He didn't boast, he didn't explain, he didn't demand recognition. He simply gazed at the horizon, his presence filling the boat with a peace deeper than the ocean itself. The disciples gathered near him, still trembling from the adrenaline, their eyes searching his face for answers they didn't know how to ask. Thomas finally spoke, his voice low. "Master, we thought we were going to die." Jesus looked at him with gentleness. "Fear clouded your eyes, but I was with you, even in the storm." Those words pierced their hearts more than the storm ever could, because the truth was painfully simple. Their fear had been louder than their trust. Matthew swallowed hard. "Teacher, what if the storm had grown stronger?" Jesus met his gaze. "Then your faith should have grown stronger." The disciples fell silent again, not out of fear this time, but out of awe. The calm sea reflected the calm in Jesus' eyes, and for the first time, they began to understand a powerful truth. It was never the storm that threatened them. It was their fear, and the one who sat with them was greater than anything the sea could ever unleash. The journey wasn't over. Across the calm waters, a new land waited, and with it, a mystery darker than the storm they had just survived. The shore where darkness waited. As the boat glided over the now silent waters, the disciples felt a strange mix of relief and tension. The storm was gone, but the memory of it still pulsed through their veins. Every so often, one of them glanced at Jesus, quiet, steady, unfazed, as if trying to understand how someone could command the very forces that controlled their world. The coastline on the other side slowly came into view, but unlike the warm, familiar shores they had left behind, this land carried a different feeling, an unsettling stillness, a heaviness in the air, like something unseen was watching them. Peter squinted into the dim light. "This place feels strange." John nodded, "Almost like the storm followed us here, but in another form." The boat scraped gently against the rocky shore. Jesus stood first, stepping onto the land with the confidence of someone who knew exactly why he was there. The disciples followed hesitantly, their feet sinking into the damp earth, their eyes scanning the unfamiliar terrain. The air felt colder, the wind quieter. Even the birds seemed to avoid this place. Andrew whispered, "Why would the Master bring us here?" Before anyone could answer, a sudden, unearthly cry shattered the silence. It echoed across the hill's roar, broken, full of torment. The disciples froze. A shadow moved near the tunes carved into the cliffs ahead. The figure stumbled into view, wild, unwashed, covered in scars. His hair hung like tangled ropes. His eyes burned with a mixture of anger and anguish. A demon-possessed man. The disciples instinctively stepped back, fear gripping their hearts. This wasn't a threat like the storm. This was a threat with a face, tormented, unpredictable, dangerous. The man ran toward them, screaming, his voice splitting the air. Stones clattered beneath his feet as he charged, and the disciples braced themselves, unsure whether to flee or fight. But Jesus didn't move. He stood firm, his presence calm yet powerful, as if even this darkness recognized him. The man stopped just a few feet away, trembling, eyes wide with something beyond madness, fear. Not of the disciples, but of Jesus. He fell to his knees, his voice cracking as he screamed, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" The disciples gasped. Even the demons knew his name, and the storm they thought they had left behind was nothing compared to the spiritual storm about to unfold. A voice that chains couldn't silence. The disciples watched in stunned silence as the possessed man knelt before Jesus, his body shaking violently, his voice echoing through the empty hills. This was a man no one dared to approach, a man who lived among tombs, who broke every chain placed on him, who terrified an entire region. Yet here he was, powerless, trembling, not before men, but before Jesus. The man's voice cracked again. "Please, don't torment me." But the words weren't truly his. The fear wasn't human. Something darker was speaking through him. Jesus stepped closer, his tone firm yet full of authority. "What is your name?" The man's head jerked back, and a guttural, chilling voice responded, "My name is Legion, for we are many." A shiver ran down the disciples' backs. Legion, a word meaning thousands, countless, a swarm of darkness tormenting one broken soul. They had faced storms, hunger, sickness, but this was different. This was evil wearing a human body. The man writhed in the dirt. The voice is battling inside him. The weight of torment pressing on every word. Don't send us out. Don't cast us into the abyss. The disciples exchanged fearful glances. Even demons were begging Jesus. Even darkness feared his authority. Nearby, a herd of pigs grazed on the hillside, ignorant of the spiritual battle unfolding. The voices screamed again, "Send us into the pigs. Let us enter them." Jesus didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He simply commanded, "Go." The word hit the air like a thunderbolt. Instantly, the man collapsed, gasping, as if a crushing weight had lifted from his chest. His body went still. His eyes softened. The torment that had consumed him for years drained away like a fading nightmare. But the hills erupted with chaos. The herd of pigs suddenly shrieked, stumbling wildly as if struck by madness. They ran, hundreds of them racing full speed toward the cliff. Before the disciples could shout, the animals plunged over the edge, disappearing into the sea below with a violent splash. Silence returned, but this silence felt different, holy, liberating, final. The once possessed man sat quietly at Jesus' feet, breathing softly like a child finally freed from fear. The disciples stared at Jesus with a new level of awe. Storms obeyed him. Legions obeyed him. Nature and the supernatural bowed before him. And they began to realize the one in their boat wasn't just a teacher. He was the one creation itself recognized. The man who finally found his mind. Morning light spread gently across the hillside, revealing a scene that felt almost impossible to believe. The man who had once been a terror to the entire region, a man who lived among tombs, who screamed through the night, who broke metal chains like they were threads, now sat quietly at Jesus' feet. His eyes, once wild and tormented, were clear. His posture was calm. His soul restored. The disciples watched him in amazement. They had seen Jesus silence a storm. They had seen him heal the sick. But this transforming a shattered, broken life into peace was a miracle that struck deep into the heart. The man touched his own face, as if checking whether he was real. Tears streamed down his cheeks. I'm free," he whispered, barely able to believe his own voice. Jesus placed a hand on his shoulder, and the man bowed his head, overwhelmed by a peace he had never known. The trauma, the voices, the darkness that had strangled him for years, it was gone. Completely gone. But not everyone was ready to see the miracle. The herdsmen who had watched their pigs plunge into the sea ran into the nearby town, shouting, breathless, terrified. Within minutes, people rushed from every direction: farmers, fishermen, merchants, each one confused, anxious, desperate to know what had happened. When they reached the hillside, they stopped in their tracks. There he was, the man they had feared for years, the man they believed no one could control, the man who had been stronger than chains, sitting calmly, clothed, in his right mind, and sitting beside Jesus. But instead of celebrating the miracle, fear flooded their hearts. How can this be? Someone whispered. What kind of power does this man Jesus have? Another muttered, if he can command demons, what else can he do? Their eyes shifted from the healed man to the lifeless sea where the pigs had vanished. and fear took over faith. They approached Jesus not with gratitude, but with trembling voices. "Please, leave our region. Go away from here. We don't understand you, and we cannot handle this power." The disciples stared in disbelief. They wanted Jesus to stay. They needed him. But these people feared him more than they feared the darkness he had just defeated. Jesus stood without argument. He never forces himself where hearts are closed. The healed man grabbed his hand, desperate. "Lord, let me come with you." But Jesus had a different plan for him, one that would change his entire community. The mission given to the broken. The man held tightly to Jesus' hand, his voice trembling with longing. "Lord, please let me come with you. I'll follow you anywhere. Just don't leave me." Here, his eyes pleaded in a way only someone once lost and now finally found could express. The disciples understood him. This region had rejected Jesus. The man had no family, no home, no community that welcomed him. All he had was the one who had freed him. Staying behind felt like being abandoned. But Jesus looked into his eyes with a compassion that went deeper than understanding. "Go home to your people," he said gently. "Tell them how much the Lord has done for you, how he has had mercy on you." The words hit the man with unexpected force. Jesus wasn't rejecting him. Jesus was sending him. He wasn't being pushed away. He was being entrusted with a mission. The man wiped his tears, his chest rising with a new kind of breath purpose. A purpose he had never known in all his years of torment. He nodded slowly, then firmly. "I will tell them everything you've done for me." Jesus smiled, and in that moment, the man felt more whole than ever before. As Jesus and the disciples walked back toward the boat, the people of the region watched from a distance, still confused, still afraid, still unsure of the power they had witnessed. They didn't understand Jesus, but they couldn't deny the miracle sitting right in front of them. And that miracle had a mission. The once possessed man followed the boat to the shore, standing tall, no longer hunched in fear, his bare feet pressed into the earth as if claiming it. This was his land now, his battlefield, his calling. The disciples glanced back at him, some impressed, some emotional. Peter whispered, "He'll do great things." As the boat drifted from the shore, the man took a deep breath and turned toward the town. Every step he took felt like a declaration. "I am no longer who I was. I am not defined by my past. I am a story God has rewritten." And he started telling that story. In marketplaces, on the streets, at doorsteps, to families who once feared him, to children who once hid from him. "He healed me," he proclaimed with a voice full of life. "He set me free." And the news spread like wildfire across the Decapolis. A region that asked Jesus to leave was now being prepared for his return by the very man darkness once controlled. Return across the quiet waters. The boat moved steadily across the now peaceful Sea of Galilee, the water rippling softly beneath it. The disciples were unusually quiet. The storm, the demons, the miracle, the fear of the townspeople, everything felt heavy. Like their minds were still trying to catch up with what their eyes had witnessed. Jesus sat at the stern, watching the horizon with a calm that settled even the deepest questions. His presence was like an anchor, steady, unshakable, unmoved by chaos or rejection. The disciples looked at him with a mixture of awe and wonder. Every moment with him seemed to reveal a new layer of his identity. John finally broke the silence. "Master, why did you let us see all this?" Jesus looked at him with gentle eyes. "Because faith grows not only through comfort, but through confrontation. You needed to see that darkness flees when light stands before it." The words sank deep. They remembered their fear in the storm. They remembered their fear on the shore. Yet Jesus had never feared anything, not the wind, not the waves, not the demons, not the rejection. Peter leaned forward, gripping the edge of the boat. "But those people, they asked you to leave. Why didn't you stay?" Jesus replied, "Hearts must be ready. Miracles plant seeds, but not every soil receives them at the same time." He paused, then added, "But I left someone there to water that seed." The disciples exchanged glances. They knew exactly who he meant, the man once bound by darkness, now freed and full of purpose. The thought brought a quiet smile to their faces. It was incredible to think that someone once feared by everyone would now become a messenger of hope. The boat continued toward the familiar shore they had left the day before. The sky was clear, the sun warm, the breeze gentler, complete contrast to the chaos they had endured. Yet the disciples felt different now, like the storm had shaken something loose inside them. Andrew whispered, "Master, will there be more storms?" Jesus didn't hesitate. "Yes." He looked at each of them, eyes firm, voice steady. "But I will be with you in every one." Those words wrapped around their hearts like armor. As the shoreline approached, they saw crowds gathering, people running, shouting, pointing toward the boat. Word had already spread that Jesus was returning, and the desperate, the broken, the hopeful were waiting. The disciples braced themselves. The sea might be calm now, but another wave of need was rushing toward Jesus. The crowd that pulled hope from his hands. Before the boat even touched the shore, the disciples could hear the noise. Voice is calling, feet rushing, desperation woven through every sound. The crowds were larger than before, pressing along the coastline, stretching far beyond the villages. People came running from every direction, their faces filled with need, pain, and hope. As soon as Jesus stepped out of the boat, the crowd surged forward, mothers carrying sick children, fathers guiding the blind, elders leaning on staffs, young men supporting injured friends. It felt like the entire shoreline was crying out at once, "Jesus, Master, help us. Rabbi, please touch my daughter. Lord, heal me. Have mercy on my family." The disciples quickly formed a loose shield around him, trying to create space, but it was impossible. People weren't just following Jesus, they were reaching for him, pulling at him, desperate to touch hope itself. In the middle of the chaos, a synagogue leader pushed through the crowd, nearly falling to his knees before Jesus. His name was Jairus, and his face carried the weight of a father's worst nightmare. "My little daughter is dying," he pleaded, voice cracking. "Please, come and lay your hands on her so she may live." The crowd fell silent enough for his words to echo. Pain like that was universal. Every parent understood it. Jesus didn't hesitate. "Take me to her." The crowd parted only enough for Jesus to move, and even then, people pressed in tightly from every side, driven by their own needs. Every step he took seemed to draw more people toward him. The disciples struggled to keep the path clear. "Back up," Peter shouted. "Give him room," James insisted. But then something strange happened. In the crushing crowd, Jesus suddenly stopped. He turned slowly, scanning the faces around him. His tone was steady, but filled with intent. "Who touched me?" The disciples stared at him, confused. Peter gestured at the crowd surrounding them. "Master, you see the people pressing against you from every side. And you ask, 'Who touched you?'" But Jesus shook his head. "No, someone touched me with faith." An instant hush fell. Somewhere in the sea of faces, someone had pulled power from him deep. Believing, desperate power. Jesus continued looking, searching for the one whose silent faith had reached him through the chaos. The disciples felt the air shift. A new miracle was unfolding, and they were seconds away from seeing it. The faith that stood when the storms returned. The crowd held its breath as Jesus searched the sea of faces. Somewhere among them was the one who had reached out not with hands alone, but with faith strong enough to draw healing directly from him. Finally, a trembling voice broke the silence. A woman stepped forward, shaking, her eyes filled with fear and relief. She had suffered for 12 long years, 12 years of pain, shame, rejection, and hopelessness. Doctors had failed her, money had drained away, hope had vanished, until she heard Jesus was coming. She fell to her knees. "It was me," she whispered. "I touched the edge of your cloak, because I believed if I just touched you, I would be healed." Jesus looked at her not with anger, not with frustration, but with tender strength. "Daughter," he said gently, "your faith has made you well. Go in peace." The woman's tears flowed freely. Her suffering ended the moment she touched him, and now her dignity was restored too. But before the miracle's joy could even settle, another storm approached. From behind Jairus came several men from his household, their faces tight with sorrow. One of them placed a hand on Jairus' shoulder. "Your daughter is gone," he said softly. "There's no need to trouble the teacher anymore." The words sliced through Jairus like a blade. His knees nearly buckled. The crowd gasped. Hope evaporated in an instant. But Jesus turned to Jairus before grief could swallow him. "Do not fear," he said. "Only believe." The journey continued no longer through a crowd, but through heartbreak. When they reached Jairus' home, people were crying, mourning, certain that death had already won. Jesus stepped inside and said, "Why all this weeping? The child is not dead. She is only asleep." They laughed at him bitter, unbelieving laughter. Jesus removed them all, keeping only Peter, James, John, and the child's parents with him. He walked to the little girl, took her hand gently, and spoke with the same authority that stilled storms and cast out legions. "Little girl, arise." Life rushed back into her. Her eyes opened. She stood up. The room erupted not in fear this time, but in awe and overwhelming joy. From storms on the sea, to storms of the soul, to storms of grief itself, Jesus had shown one truth again and again. Nature obeys him, darkness fears him, death bows before him, and faith in him always finds the shore.